Hey, you're watching Rapid MMA. I'm Tyler. Let's go over UFC Brisbane's main card, and I'll also give you my DraftKings lineup as well. So starting with Beck Rawlings versus Te-Huna Ham. Rawlings is the underdog in this fight. Ham is 125. However, Beck is a much larger opponent. I think Te-Huna is adapting to the larger weight class since 115 is the lowest class there is in the women's divisions. Getting inside that reach is going to be difficult. I think she already absorbs a lot of shots anyway. I think her striking is pretty crisp, and she's pretty experienced as well. Simply put, the grappling and clinch exchanges will probably favor Rawlings. It's a close fight despite the size differential, though, on the feet. And Te-Huna is the favorite. However, I'm not putting too much stock into this fight. I think Beck Rawlings will be able to squeak out a decision. So I'll say Beck via decision. Next is James Te-Huna versus Steve Bossé. Te-Huna is a 255 favorite. Another fight where someone has a decent height and reach advantage. Te-Huna is 3-inch reach advantage over Steve, and he's 2 inches taller. However, Te-Huna is on a 3-fight losing streak. To his credit, it was against Nate Marquardt, Shogun, and Teixeira, so I wouldn't, those are killers in their own right, so I wouldn't look at that too much. I think it's quite the degradation in opponent. All the credit in the world to Steve, but he's no Shogun, he's no Marquardt, and he's no Teixeira. So Te-Huna had a tough run. 2 submissions and 1 KO. Also hasn't fought since June of 2014. So that being said, he's still more experienced. Bossé only has 1 fight in the UFC and was knocked out in the first round. So I don't think Bossé brings much to the table other than grit. Obviously, Te-Huna is susceptible to be knocked out, so he might get clipped, but not without firing back, I don't think. I'm curious if Te-Huna will be super cautious. 3-fight losing streak regardless. He doesn't want to be cut, so it could be a boring fight, but I think Steve will bring it, and Te-Huna can capitalize on an opening. So I'm going to be hopeful. I'll say Te-Huna first round knockout. Next is Dan Kelly versus Antonio Carlos Jr. Kelly is a huge underdog at plus 385. Carlos Jr. at minus 500, so it kind of makes sense. Carlos has a 5-inch reach advantage. He's much younger at 26, and Kelly is 38. I think Daniel Kelly is a decent boxer, though, at least offensively. I can definitely see him landing good shots on Junior. I just think that his reach might fail him, and Junior usually finds himself in the clinch. So once Junior closes that distance, I'm not so sure Kelly's old busted knees are going to help him out any. Most of Kelly's wins come via submission, and I just really doubt he can submit Carlos Jr. unless he hurts him on the feet, then takes him down or something along those lines. I think Kelly's best chance is definitely standing. I just can't stop thinking about the wear on Kelly's knees, and I think after a good back and forth first round, Carlos will find a way to finish it in the second. So I'll go with Carlos via second round submission victory, although I won't be surprised if it goes to a decision. Next is Jake Matthews and Johnny Case. Matthews coming in as a slight favorite over Case. Great matchup. Both are young, hungry fighters climbing their way up. Initially, I felt like Matthews was a good pick, and I still do, especially since he's fighting in his homeland. However, Case has the experience. He's just a little older than Jake Matthews, so there's not a big age difference there. I think this will be closely contested, but I like Case's striking over Matthews. A bit more refined and dynamic, in my opinion. I think Case can exploit some holes Matthews has since he's still very young. A lot of people are going with a decision victory for either Case or Matthews, but I think Case can get a TKO in this fight, so obviously usually happens in the first round, so I'm going to go first round TKO for Johnny Case. I'm excited for this fight either way. Next is Lombard versus Magny. I have a breakdown video with my pick for this fight. I have Hector Lombard in my DraftKings lineup because I do think he's worth a bet. To my surprise, he came in as an underdog. I didn't think that would happen. I thought for sure Magny would come in as a big underdog, but that's not the case. I think it's just the height, reach, and the year layoff and PED suspension that really put Lombard as the underdog. So I think Magny uses his reach well, but he doesn't use it great, at least not yet. His punches don't seem to strike fear into anyone, and Magny gets caught against the fence sometimes. Magny keeps getting better and better every time we see him, and I do think he can win a decision for sure. However, if he slips up, I just think Lombard can get the knockout. My pick is for Neil Magny for a decision, but like I said, Lombard is on my DraftKings lineup. Interesting piece of information I heard in a recent interview with Magny, though. Magny might not stay on the outside. he might go and bring the fight to Lombard. Something about not letting Lombard dictate the pace of pressure, something along those lines. I just don't think that's a good idea. Maybe for some fighters it is, but I think Magny does want to play the game that Lombard employs. Let Lombard get that center octagon. Maybe not so offensively strong, but let him come in, because I think it's just a kickboxer or boxer's dream to let that happen. I just don't think Lombard is that good on the feet. He has a lot of power. He's very good at pressuring and corralling his opponents, but I think a good boxer sees that from a mile away, and there's a lot of openings that Lombard leaves. So yeah, I think Magny can capitalize there, and I expect him to be better. But like I said, have Lombard in my DraftKings, but my personal pick for sure is Magny decision. Moving on, Frank Mir versus Mark Hunt. I did a breakdown for this as well. I think Mir is an underrated striker, and I do believe he can stand with Hunt. I don't think Mir can finish Hunt on the feet by any means, and I do think it'd be hard to generate a dominant offense since Hunt is much more experienced, at least in K1. However, I think he can stand and trade long enough to make Mark miss, make him work, perhaps tie him up in the clinch. Frank's advantage is on the ground, so I expect him to get it to the ground late in the first or maybe early second. Obviously, this is Hunt's prime opportunity to get the knockout, so I won't be surprised if that happens. If Frank does get it to the ground, which I think he can, I do think he can find a submission. I think it'll maybe happen in the third when Mark is a bit more tired. Frank Mir also had some interesting things to say in an interview. He was talking about the humidity and how he's glad he came a little bit early, that we can switch up some of his submissions that he wasn't able to get a grip on. He had to do, secure and change some of his tactics. And that made me think twice, that if Frank Mir does get a third round submission or tries to go for it, it just might be a little too slippery, especially when it's the main event in a hot arena, third round. I just wonder if Frank can secure it. I'm still hopeful. If he doesn't, I still see him winning a decision, but I just couldn't pass up Mir as a plus 150 underdog, so I have him in my lineup as well. I think Frank Mir wins the third round submission, and yeah. Here's one last look at my lineup. Thanks for watching Rapid MMA. Comment with your thoughts below. Thanks.